Hi, I'm Chantel with 141 Design Company, and let's take a look at what it takes to paint the Hygge display frame for the Hygge Holiday Chart by Hands On Design. The piece was custom made to fit the Hands On Design Hygge Holiday Sampler in the center of this middle frame. The piece comes with the two frame pieces as well as a mounting mat board. It has been cut from a 1/4 inch maple. We're going to roll it this afternoon using the color Faded Burlap from the DIY Debbie's Design Diary paint line. To begin, I always like to paint the back side of a piece that is this large so that we stabilize the wood to prevent any warping since we are adding a water-based product. I'm using this small craft roller I picked up at Hobby Lobby and just rolling the paint right onto the back. It doesn't have to be very thick. We're just doing the same thing to the back that we did to the front. It will stabilize our piece. Your Hygge Holiday display piece will come to you like this. You have an outside piece that is all one piece for the frame. This middle section can be discarded. It's only in there for travel to keep the center of it stable. You can set that aside. You have an inner frame along with a custom cut mat piece for finishing your Hygge Holiday Sampler. The baseboard has been cut with shiplap grooves, and there's also a piece on there that is etched in. You can see the lines that are etched in the middle. That's your space for lining up that inner frame, so you know exactly where that's going to be. Let's go ahead and paint this base piece. I'm going to wipe it off to wipe off any dust or lint that may be on our board. We've got our supplies here that we're going to need. I am going to use this stiletto piece while I'm painting it, and what I'm using that for is to drag it down the lines of the shiplap grooves to remove any excess paint that might be in there. We're going to use a roller though, and that's going to help quite a bit, and we're painting it with this color Faded Burlap from the Debbie's Design Diary DIY paint line. I'm going to use a paper plate here just as my little paint tray, I guess, that I'm going to use the roller with. The roller I picked up at Hobby Lobby, but any craft roller will do. It's a foam roller. We're going to just get our paint onto the roller. Oh, you can see I've got a good clump there. The paint does tend to get clumpy sometimes. I just pick it out. And we'll go ahead and get it completely covered. You can see the coverage is great because I'm not putting it on super thick because I don't want to fill the grooves with paint. That's why I'm using a roller versus a paintbrush on this one. I'm getting a nice consistent even coverage on the entire board. I'm not going to paint the edges, but now I'm going to come through and drag through those lines with the stiletto just to pull out any extra paint that's filling the grooves. I do have it sped up, so it's probably not exactly this fast when I'm doing it, but it is pretty easy to do. Another item that you can use if you don't have a stiletto like this is I found just this inexpensive seam ripper I had in my stash. This is going to work too, so maybe this is something you have. And you can see the point of this goes right down the groove and pulls out any extra paint that's in there. There's two sides to the shiplap lines, so I'm going down each one of them and removing the excess paint to reveal the line. I just wipe it off with my fingers each time before I put it back onto the board. There we go. Now mostly the areas that we're going to be concerned with obviously are the ones that are going to show. So the inside of the board, that's going to be covered by your stitching. So it's really just the borders all the way around. So I'm coming back and just kind of focusing on those areas and not worrying too much about the middle. The rectangular grooves that are in there, you don't need to dig that out. That's just the line for where the frame is going to get put in. And you can see this is the area I'm focused on. Although I'll show you how I can get some extra paint out of those inside grooves. This is how you do that. So that's a handy tool to use as well if you have one of those laying around, and they're pretty inexpensive if you want to pick one up for doing this task when you're painting. Now that we've got our first coat on that, we're going to set that aside and go ahead and focus on our frame pieces. Again, these are cut specifically for the Hygge Holiday Sampler piece. Let's get that clump off of there. The paint is a chalk and clay based paint, so those clumps of clay, you know, like mine has been open for a while and it's not completely new, but it's just something I just pick them out and set them off to the side. And we're just going to roll the entire outside of the frame. Now on this I am kind of trying to be careful. I'm not going to paint the edges. I'm going to leave mine dark on the edges, the laser trim. It's slipping around, so I'm going to just hold it down with that stiletto so I can hold it in place without getting my fingerprint into the glue, or into the paint rather, and go all the way around. But like I was saying, I don't want to push too hard so that I don't have too much paint that goes over the edge. I'm going to be able to sand it back off later, but if I can keep as much off as now while I'm doing this step, it'll just help with sanding later. Set this one aside and we can do the other one. The roller is making quick work of getting this paint job done. And you can see I tried to keep as much off the edge as I could so I don't have to sand as much later. And we're all set. Before I do any distressing or sanding and smoothing out of the paint, I am going to hit it with this hairdryer and make sure I've got everything nice and dry. One trick to knowing if it's dry or not is to touch the board, and if it still feels cool, then it's still damp. So give it a nice dry. In order to sand and clean up the edges, I got a little too much over the side there. I'm going to take this sanding tool. This is available in my Amazon shop. You can grab these also at Lowe's or Menards, and sand off the extra paint on the edges. I'm also going to go ahead and sand the entire board just to smooth it out. And then take my cloth and dust out the grooves. Got it all cleaned up. If there's any extra at this point, you can still come back even though the paint is dry and kind of gouge it right back out. And you can see I'm mostly focusing on the areas I know that are going to be visible once the piece is completely done. Got my edges all cleaned up. On both of these, we'll go ahead and burnish this paint as well. And when I say burnish, I mean I'm just taking the dry cloth and just kind of giving it solid rub down just to get off any extra dust and kind of, like I said, burnish the paint. It helps set the paint as well. To attach our frame pieces to the base, we're going to use the Titebond Quick and Thick Multi-Surface Glue, and we'll add the middle one first. I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm just going to add a thin bead all the way around, but first I will also make sure that I don't have any dust or chunks of paint here on the bottom side so that I've got a nice smooth fit when I put this on the top. I'm going to take the glue and run a bead right through the center area as best I can, all the way around this frame. Oh, it's probably a good idea to move this one so that I don't have a big clump of glue fall on top of it. Oh, that's much easier. We'll put that down on the bottom, or lay it straight down on the top, I guess, of the table. And then I'm just going to take my finger and kind of smooth this out and get a nice even coverage. Because if I leave it thick, it's going to just kind of squish out from underneath when I push it on top of the board. So you want enough glue here, but not too much, so that we're not cleaning up a lot of extra glue on the frame. Got a baby wipe there so I can wipe my fingers off as I go. And this being that middle part, we're going to line it up right with these etch lines that are in the center of your Hygge display piece. Okay, we'll get that just right and give it a good press. I can see I've got a little glue coming out. It's just mostly on the inside there, so I'm not too worried about that. But there's some on the outside. We're going to get that cleaned up before it sets up, or just, before it completely sets up. Cleaning up my fingers. So I don't want to use a wet one. Let's just use the dry cloth. And come in here and wipe up any extra glue. And I'm mostly, like I said, just worried about the outside because that inside area is going to be covered by my stitching. The stitching fits edge to edge inside the frame. There we go. Now I'm going to push down the corners to make sure I've got good adhesion on the corner of each side all the way around. I like to hold it for a little bit and let it set up before I put something on top of it, so that if I move it, I don't want to bump it when I put something on top of it. So I like it to dry just a little bit. Now I'm using that piece that we were going to just throw away and discard to set it on top to get good leverage across the entire piece and push down my corners mostly of this frame for good contact. And then you can go ahead and put something heavy on the corners when you know that it's in the right place. I'm just using some little paint jars. They're just heavy enough that they're gonna keep our piece in place while that dries. It won't take long to dry. Our center has set up, so now let's put the outer frame on. And we are going to use these clamps that you see there on the table to keep our edges clamped down on this one, because it's a little bit bigger, a little bit more to work with, and we don't want it to shift when the glue is drying. We don't want our alignment to get out of whack. Applying it the same way I did before. and just smoothing out that extra glue. You can see the laser marks on the bottom of this, and that's how I knew that that was the bottom side of the board, and so I painted the other side. So the laser etching or marks, residue basically from the laser that's on the wood on this side, indicates that that is your B side, or that is the side you will be gluing to the surface, and you will paint the other side. Let's get this all lined up. And this will fit perfect and flush all the way around. So I'm just kind of, adjusting it with my fingers at this point, giving it a good press. Making sure I've got it exactly where I want it. And pushing that glue down so that it adheres to the surface of the paint. Some of it is squishing out underneath. I'll clean that up later as well. And now I've got my corners all lined up. You can see I have my edges sanded. Okay, now to hold these corners down, because the corners are the part I'm going to worry about the most, I'm going to use these little paper clamps, but I don't want the clamps to mark up my paint. So I've got a couple little pieces of like chipboard, cardboard, really skinny stuff, and I'm going to put those on either side, hold it down, and then clamp on top of that. That way the clamp won't scratch my paint surface. And then I'm going to come over on this side. We're going to just do a corner at a time. Same thing. And you can put it on the top or on the side, either one. It's still going to hold that corner in place. Get our little paper. It's just one of those big paper clips, right? But it's good enough that it holds this 1/2 inch worth of, because you've got a 1/4 inch on the top frame and a 1/4 inch on the base. So I've got a 1/2 inch width of wood here. Put our protective pieces down. You could use fabric here if you want, felt. I like the cardboard piece though, because there's no pattern that might transfer into your paint. And the final edge. I guess another thing to be sure of is that you don't have any glue on the top of your piece when you put these paper pieces down, so that you're not gluing those to the surface of your frame. Now we're going to let that set, and it's going to just hold those corners in place. We're all dry, so we can remove our clamps, i.e. paper clips. A nice fit. To clean out that glue that kind of squished out from underneath, I'm going to grab that little seam ripper that I was using and just kind of drag down here. If you grab it before it completely dries, or maybe it's just kind of like, we'll call it half dry, it just scrapes right out of the corners. Really easy. You can see it kind of balling up there. There was a little bit of a skin over the top of the paint, or the glue, I guess is what I want to say. So that's why it's easy to kind of drag this along and clean it up. Details, details. Now before I put any clear coat, if I wanted to put more stain on the ends of those boards, and I can't see them now, but you know, where I sanded, it kind of scruffed off some of the laser. I could stain the edges too, maybe just with a little Q-tip or something. Let's hit it with the hairdryer, and this is just to blow off any chunks of glue or anything or dust that might be on the piece, and we'll get ready to spray it with our clear coat spray. I'm using this Prolux brand. It is the Deft formula. And we'll go ahead and spray the entire thing. You want to do this in a well-ventilated area. Just going to turn my board around as I go, so I get all of the corners and edges. Now our Hygge Holiday frame is completely done and ready for our piece to go in. I think it looks fantastic. I do like the edges being dark like that, so it kind of shows the contrast. And then you can see this piece is custom cut for the inside. It's about 1/8 of an inch smaller than that inside piece, so that I have room to wrap my fabric and batting. We did use the quick and thick. We've got our stiletto tools, the clear coat finish, the color Faded Burlap, which is the color that the pattern was done in. The model on the cover was done in that color, and then our roller and sanding pad. Thanks so much for joining me in this tutorial. I hope you found this helpful, and the Hygge Holiday frame is available in our online shop at chantels141.com.